Hi guys, I'm going to sort of talk about the Australian Grand Prix that happened this morning because it was pretty phenomenal. Uh, as tribute to probably the driver of the day, I'm playing as Romain Grosjean in F1 Race Stars to give you guys something to look at while I talk. So I guess we get started while I race. So first of all, I just wanted to talk about the qualifying, which was a bit of a shambles. And obviously, it came out this morning that they aren't going to do it again. They've getting rid of it and going back to the old rules, which is probably the right thing to do. But I find it a bit disappointing because it was the big rule change going to this year, and their solution to fixing it is to go back to last year, which is like, okay, so you tried really hard to make things better, you really messed up. So your solution is let's just go back to what it was like before. You're never gonna progress if you insist on always just undoing the bad things you do. But obviously, it had a few major issues. I at first I thought it was interesting, but I realised the thing that was interesting about it was that nobody had any idea what was going on, and that had a little bit of excitement about it. But it just doesn't work. First of all, the problem is eliminating a driver every 90 seconds doesn't work when it takes 2.5 minutes to leave the garage and set a lap. You can't. There was no time to respond, and having one of those sort of dramatic elimination things is only ever going to work if the competitors have a chance to change the course of things as they go. Basically, what it seemed to create, from my perspective, was the exact same structure of cars out on track and how they plan on doing their laps as we had last year, except they did fewer laps because some of them were already out by the time they wanted to do the next one. And so all we got was less track time and no difference in the show or the teams and drivers going through, except I think one of the Red Bull guys got a little bit caught out, but I don't think his car was working anyway, so his response may not have made a difference. So it was all just a mess. And speaking of a mess, I'm a little bit of a mess in this race as well. But what really annoys me about the giving up is that they're not actually looking into how they could make a similar system that could be potentially exciting work. Now I know people say, "Oh, qualifying wasn't broken in the first place, so we don't need to fix it." But no, I think I understand where they were going with trying to fix qualifying. In that, not that it was particularly broken, but that it was a way of spicing up the weekend in terms of a show without fundamentally changing what a Grand Prix is, because obviously qualifying is effectively an arbitrary way of deciding who goes where, and you want to make it as competitive as you can, but at the same time it is a show. The fairest way of doing it was the old, you've got Friday afternoon and Saturday morning to set a lap time, and whoever set the fastest lap was on pole, but that wasn't interesting to watch, and that wasn't good for the TV companies, it wasn't really necessarily good for the viewers. And what they tried, the intentions for this new format were good, I think. But as I said, 90 seconds is not fast enough to do anything. They were encouraging people not to drive, effectively. And they terribly communicated it to the fans. No one really knew. If you're watching on TV, for the first session at least, no one had any idea what was going on. And sorry, I just got to do the start, and we can talk. And also, tyre saving just came into it all over again, and it's like I could try and scrape through, or I could save a set of tyres. And Formula 1 teams, being Formula 1 teams, this is what we've been seeing for several years now, is that they will do whatever it takes to make Sunday as good as they can. And effectively, the difference between 11th and 8th is not enough to encourage a team to compromise their race strategy. So if they can get a better strategy out of losing a couple of grid places, they'll do it. So tyre saving was never going to work. And my main overriding thinking at the time was if it was 2 minutes rather than 90 seconds, and they had the old refueling rigs for when they, the ones that do really high speeds, and they were kind of dangerous, but there was a slight excitement to them, and you could refuel a car in 8 seconds. Then it would work because they could do splash and dash and try and set a lap time and make good on the format at hand. I didn't like certain suggestions. I saw a lot of people saying they should be allowed to finish the lap that they're on. The problem is if you finish the lap that you're on as the guy in last place, then your lap is fast. The guy that you've then displaced, does he get to finish the lap he's on? By the time he's done that, another 90 seconds are up and they're eliminating 2 drivers, and just the knock-on effect was too much. I think you have to have that sort of hard cut-off. That's saying no one goes past this point. And maybe you can make that work. And again, this is all conjecture because they're not going to try and make it work. They're just going to quit. But I think people were maybe jumping a little bit on a too simple a solution there. But I've come up with a similar idea that I think could work, and it is definitely not going to be perfect. But I just thought it might be more interesting. And this was, as far as I can tell, this would in some way help with the making people run, which is Q1 20-minute session like it used to be. You cannot pit for that entire 20 minutes. You start running, everybody gets out and they start timing the laps like normal at the start of the 20 minutes. And if you are not still circulating at the end of the 20 minutes, you have to start from the back of the grid. So that's the reason to make people stay out, is that if you don't make it all the way around if you don't complete the session, you don't get anything at all from it. And then you would continue with the eliminating someone every 90 seconds like the plan was with Saturday's format. And I just think this would give you the combined thing if they keep running. Lap times would come down because you'd have to be fueled for the entire session, so you continuously get faster and faster. And you'd have that risk of if you think you're about to get eliminated, you can take a little bit more out of your tyres to squeeze through, but then you're going to get slower as the session goes on. For the teams that think they're going to be last anyway, they can fuel less because they might be eliminated anyway, so they don't need to keep going. It brings a strategy into it. It makes it not a sprint race, but like some sort of increased spectacle to the event. And then Q2, the same thing, 15 minutes, and then Q3 would be the 10-car shootout, like has been working for the last 10 years. You get that way. We get to see the true speed of the cars. We'll get to see a fair reflection of who's on pole. And that was always interesting to watch anyway, so I don't think that needs changing. But I just think making Q1 and Q2 a little bit more dramatic wouldn't go amiss if it can be done in a way that actually works, rather than, because Sebastian Vettel was saying that all the drivers knew beforehand that this new system was never going to work. So how did they even get off the ground if everybody knew? Because I assumed that the drivers told the teams, and the teams would have told the FIA. Just don't let things that aren't going to work happen. That will be my main. I know everything surrounding the rules in Formula 1 don't make sense anyway, so maybe this was inevitable. But I just think it's disappointing when it's because people paid to go and watch that. You've got to pay more to go on a Saturday than just to go on the Sunday. So this isn't like there are harmed parties in this. I think it's very unfortunate for all the people that paid to see cars sitting in a garage. Anyway, onto the race now, and it was great. You know that my fears are like, you know, I was worried that Mercedes might have been too fast when I looked at qualifying. I was like, yeah, this isn't good, is it? But I think we're gonna have a fight on our hands this year. I know the result was Mercedes, Vettel, which is the standard result, or was the standard result for the last year. And to be honest, probably could have been the standard result for the previous year had Vettel not been at Red Bull. It just seems to be so obviously the result every time. But I think it seemed more competitive. And the thing that made it interesting for me is that I think Vettel would have won the race had Ferrari not messed up his strategy, which is the opposite of the case for most of the races in the previous years. Yeah, when it was Mercedes messing up the strategy and Ferrari getting it exactly right. So, you know, I think that bodes really well for the championship. If he's not going to be on pole every week, but he's third and he gets a good start and he's racing faster than them, then it's going to be fine. I think it should be interesting to watch. And I just had a bad crash there. But, you know, the start of this morning's race, it feels like yesterday because I went back to bed afterwards. But that was the way I think start should be. And I know it'll probably, over the course of the year, people will get much better at the starting and it won't happen again. But when you take away the driver race, this is what happens. I remember when it got retraction control and almost everybody crashed in the first race of the season. And it just, you've got to make it a little bit more difficult for the drivers. I don't mean in a dangerous way or in a making it, you know, patently slower way, but having the starts be more difficult is not a difficult thing to do, and it doesn't really take anything away. It just makes it more important to do things properly. And Mercedes fell down in that front, and Ferrari did very, very well. As for the other, sorry, I've taken a route here. I don't. When we take, and from that point, as soon as Vettel got out in front, he was the fastest driver on the grid. You know, he was pulling away from Rosberg in a manner which shocked me to an extent. I thought, you know, it was inevitable that he'd be caught. But he didn't. He was pulling away. Then the undercut came in, and Rosberg got very close after the first round of stops. But that was if the race had panned out normally, he would have won fairly comfortably, I think. It didn't pan out normally. There was a massive shunt. Before we get to the shunt, the other reason why I think this season can be more competitive than usual is when you just look at what happened when Hamilton fell behind. In previous years, that Mercedes would rip through the field. This year, he got stuck behind Max Verstappen for ages. Now, Verstappen is on a year-old Ferrari engine and in a Toro Rosso. He should not be able to hold up the fastest car on the grid, unless they are much closer than they used to be. And so I think that's a very promising position to be in. You know, Massa was holding people up, Ricciardo was holding people up. You know, I know it sounds negative to say we want to see people held up. We don't want to see the fastest cars at the front. But unfortunately, that's how you get excitement in Formula One. It's not like a spec series where everyone should be able to compete on an equal footing. It is always a case of you're being held up rather than you're racing. And I'm fairly comfortable with that because it's always been the way. And as long as it's interesting to watch and it causes an obstacle for the championship winning teams, then I'm perfectly happy with it to continue. But then there was that massive shunt, you know. Gutierrez in his Haas basically brake tested would be the wrong word, but he had to brake a lot earlier than Alonso did in his McLaren, which, you know, that's a good sign for McLaren if they're actually cornering correctly. But you know, he was shocked by Gutierrez's movement, which reminded me a huge amount, I'm sure I'm not the only one that thinks this, of the Mark Webber, Heikki Kovalainen, Valencia 2010 incident, where Webber in the Red Bull, which was that year, that's probably one of the fastest cars we'll ever see, just had no idea how difficult it was for a what was it at the time? It would have been a Lotus Racing car, not Caterham or Team Lotus, because they seem to change the name every year they're in the sport. But he had no idea how early those cars had to brake to make the corner, and he just drove straight off the back of them. And it wasn't as an extreme example of brake differential this time, but it was as extreme example of a crash. Alonso didn't know what it was that Gutierrez did to make the corner, and it was messy. And it was four corner shunt. Basically, none of the car was left at the end, but Fernando Alonso got out quickly, and he's been given the all clear, which is just remarkable. I've been a long advocate of make F1 as safe as you can. I know this sounds silly, but when you read what some people say on social media, this doesn't seem to be the widely held view of all Formula 1 fans, that racing should be as safe as possible, which I find difficult to fathom, because I don't want to see someone die. That's not interesting to me. I think the spectacular crashing, that's alright, but I desperately don't want it to be a negative result on anyone's health. I think bits of carbon fibre everywhere, and I took a terrible turn there. It's fine, as long as it's safe. And by golly, that car took the impact well. For anyone wondering how it is people survive those crashes, just from a technical standpoint, all the bits of carbon fibre you see on the floor, that's the energy from the crash. They've taken the energy rather than the driver, and that's why the driver survives. So, astonishing he's alright. Do not let safety ever get worse, and I was terrible in that race. And saying safety get worse doesn't sound like English either, but you know what I mean. We just want to keep everything safe. Oh, now I sound like a blooming nurse that comes around to schools telling people to not fall off chairs and shit like that. I don't even remember if that happens. I didn't sleep very much last night because I had to get up at 5 AM, so I'm a little bit frazzled by this. But what this big crash did was it meant that there's a red flag, the race was neutralised, and it sort of brought everything into a far more interesting race situation. Now, prior to the restart, Vettel and I'm only going to look at this from the case of the front three. We could analyse every single driver on the grid's race, but I don't think that helps clear up the picture. I think let's go from the three people that could win the race and work backwards from there. So, prior to the restart, Vettel and Rosberg were basically 30 seconds up the road from Lewis Hamilton. They pitted and then passed him before he pitted, which is an absolutely huge lead, and made it almost impossible, I think, for Hamilton to win the race from there, because they'd gone onto super soft tyres, which is theoretically, it meant they had to stop again, and whereas Hamilton was on the mediums, he wouldn't have to stop again. But getting one less stop out of your strategy is only worthwhile if you are within the time that it would take to do a stop. If you've already got a 30-second lead, stopping again is fine. So at that point, I think Hamilton was out of the race. And I saw a lot of people saying and now this is, I think people sometimes sort of forget what's going on in front of them, and I do this all the time as well, where you think the race result from any particular race situation is based on what you guessed the performance would be, not what the performance has been. So you look at the situation and you go, well, Hamilton's already pitted and he's not going to stop again, so surely the fact that other people can pit and put on different tyres is going to help him. But what helped him was the cutting that lead from 30 seconds to none. That was a huge difference for him, because it basically took away the lack of performance he had in the start of the race. Now, once you can change your tyres, Ferrari made the huge mistake. Now, I think everyone sort of knows afterwards that they made a huge mistake because they didn't win and they were in the lead. But the reason why I think it was so bad was when you're in the lead and you're driving and you're going faster than the other cars, you're pulling away. The last thing you need to do is take the aggressive strategy. I know this sounds negative, but if you're winning the race, you need to take the strategy that is most likely going to neutralise whatever the other teams do, which in this case would have been copy Rosberg exactly. You're ahead of him, you're on do the same tyre strategy as him, and you should, given the relative performance on the race so far, that should result in a win. Ferrari, now this is when I think you fall into that trap of going on, this is what I think our performance is rather than this is what our performance has been today, is they took they have to take a risk to win, despite the fact that they didn't have to take a risk because they were the fastest car on the track. And once you fall into that trap, then you're taking risks that aren't necessarily going to work. And I think Vettel probably executed the strategy as well as he could. The super soft tyre was not fast enough, and the soft tyre wasn't fast enough to make up the giant time difference it made in having to stop again. And I think that when you look in the cold heart today, was Rosberg faster lap for lap when they were on the same strategy? No. And was how much further down the road did he finish? Like 10 or 15 seconds. So they made the wrong call. And I think you track him beat for beat, and the worst that could have happened today if they stayed on the medium tyre was they would have finished second. And finishing second in the first race of the season is a great result. It doesn't matter who you are, you should take that. And the risk they took, I don't think was necessarily worth it in the first place. Whereas obviously Lewis Hamilton, he was down in 7th place after the restart. He didn't have to pit again, but he had to pass some cars, and he seemed to be struggling with passing cars. But he managed to finish second because ultimately that's the pace of the Mercedes. There was a long enough time for him to pass those cars, and the only real difference would have been had Vettel stayed out in front and had Raikkonen not been on fire. I think we could be talking about Hamilton in 4th were it not for those two situations, which would have, I think, changed the entire perspective of the weekend, because a Mercedes 1-2 is not a perfect way to start a season when you've had 2 years of Mercedes dominating. But anyway, as for everybody else, as you can tell, I'm racing this Romain Grosjean right now because I thought he was absolutely brilliant today. Now, I know the red flag really helped Haas because they basically didn't stop. They didn't have to do a stop, but not having to stop was only going to help if you can drive fast enough to keep the cars behind you. And he did. They were on the lead lap. There were 10 cars behind them. That's the thing. They finished 6th, but I remember Mark Webber finished 6th on his debut back in 2002. But he finished 6th because most of the other cars pulled out of the race. When there's 10 cars behind you, you've got a good race car and you've driven a good race. So I genuinely think Haas, I know their other car didn't finish for reasons we've already talked about, but 6th place, 8 points, I think is the most impressive start to a season of my lifetime. Not start to a season, sorry, start to a constructor's career. I think they would have scored points every year since 1960, which is because I sometimes think when you talk about oh, well done, you scored a point in your debut, but you finished 10th because now the points are down to 10 when they used to only go down to 8 and then they used to go only down to 6th. You know, it's a different ball game. But Haas would have been in a points scoring position ever since 1960, which is almost the entire history of the championship. So, genuinely impressive result. Historically, is up there. You know, it's better than Toyota's. You know, the last sort of genuine, fully fledged new constructor to score points on their debut was Toyota. But Toyota is one of the biggest car manufacturers in the world. They had a huge budget and they had an entire year of testing before they came onto the grid. So, you know, they're not comparable situations. And I hope that this continues. You know, the two most important things for Formula One are having a broad and varied constructors' championship where lots of different teams are having good results and are financially stable, and multiple winners. And if Haas can start like this, there's no reason to think that in a few years' time they won't be able to produce a race-winning car. And in Romain Grosjean, they've certainly got a driver that could win races. So I think it's all very positive for them. The other guy that had a really good race day is obviously Daniel Ricciardo, because 4th place. I don't really know what to think of the Red Bull this year. I don't know where they're going to be. I guess we'll find out in the fullness of time. But I thought 4th place for him when he was running in 2nd for a long time as well. It's a really good result, and it will stand him in good stead as the year goes on, because it looks like, you know, I think the Red Bull's hope is to be racing Williams, and he beat Massa first time out. That's a big start, and if he can sort of get in around that sort of Massa Raikkonen battle, which we saw last year, then they'll be in a good place, and he might even have a teammate if Kvyat can start a race at some point to go with him. As for Massa, I think that's probably quite disappointing for him. I think you want to be the best of the rest. You know, the Williams have been consistently that sort of 2nd or 3rd team, and I think when they see a Ferrari retire and then aren't 4th, that's a bad weekend for them. So I think 5th place behind a Red Bull is not, you know, it's not the end of the world, but it's certainly not the result that he'll want to continue sort of pushing his case for being there. You know, I find it very depressing talking about Felipe Massa, because I used to really like him, but I think he's one of those drivers that have gone on without ever really doing much, and when space on the grid is at a premium, I don't want to say he should retire, but I think there is perhaps more capable drivers now that could take that seat. Now obviously I say this and Valtteri Bottas is losing to him, so Bottas, you got to up your game too. But I sort of wish that Williams, you know, it's twofold. One, they need drivers that are really going to squeeze everything out of the car, and 2, they need to get their strategy right. But if they do that, they could be much higher up the grid than they are. And by much I mean 1 place higher. So yeah, I find it a little bit depressing watching them at the moment. Carlos Sainz, Max Verstappen are everywhere. I don't know how they do it, but they always seem to just be the centerpiece of whatever race is going on at any one time, even if that race is just between the two of them. But you know, Verstappen was the main thorn in in Hamilton's side at the start of the race, and then after the restart, it was Verstappen and Sainz in front of him, and then after they had to pit, there was the tussle with Jolyon Palmer and the swearing over the radio. Like, they're just everywhere at all times, and if they're going to be the entertainers on the grid, that's good, because they're very good at that. But I don't know how they do it. I'd love to see a really quiet race for Toro Rosso and just see what that means, because I think a quiet race for them could mean finishing 3rd, 4th, or 5th, which would be really good for them. You know, that's 2 young drivers should be scoring big points right now, and as much as finishing 9th and 10th is exciting, I think they want to be further up the grid too, and it looks like their car has the performance to do it. Speaking of cars that have the performance to do it, I honestly expected a lot more out of Force India. Hulkenberg was what, 6th? No, 7th even, because Grosjean was 6th. And Perez didn't finish in the points. That's not the result that the testing necessarily led me to believe it would happen. And they didn't seem to be pushing much further than they were getting, which I think is a worrying situation. We'll see more in Bahrain. Maybe this is a one-off, but I was a bit disappointed by them because I thought they'd be further up the sharp end of the grid. And the only other two drivers I really want to talk about before I finish this video and fail to win again, Jolyon Palmer and Pascal Wehrlein. Neither of them scored points. Neither of them necessarily tore up trees, but I thought they both looked really competent racing drivers. I know that may sound really patronising, but they looked like they should be there. They were as part of the tussle with the Toro Rosso boys. Jolyon Palmer looked like he knew how to drive. He didn't look like he was someone straight out. They were three young guys, all that used to have had sort of prominent junior Formula careers, and none of them looked like they were still junior drivers. Obviously Verstappen's words made him sound a bit childish, but there was no suggestion that they didn't know how to drive fairly but hard, because that's really what I think we all want to see, is guys that they're not scrappy, but they're fighty, and I thought that's both the Toro Rosso guys and Palmer did that very well. And I need to get past Pedro de la Rosa before the finish line. I have done that. Oops. And Wehrlein, he made a good start, and it didn't necessarily all pan out that well for him towards the end. But he won. Oh, no, he did. Sorry, I won. No, I didn't even win. I came third. Blimey. This is hard to talk when you do this, by the way, especially when you're trying to say stuff that's not just giggling. But Wehrlein didn't get in trouble. He was mixing it with other cars for a long time, which in a manner is an impressive feat in itself. And I think when you're a rookie, what you really want to do is have some quiet races. I know again it sounds patronising, but you just want to. You don't want to be in front of the stewards. You don't want to be lapped. If you're not getting in the way, you're driving roughly on par with everybody else around you, and you're finishing races, everything is going well. And I think for Wehrlein, his goal has basically, and this again sounds very negative, but if we get to Spa and we've forgotten he's a rookie, then he's done really well. And I think Palmer's going to be in a similar boat. That's just make it look like you know where you are and you know what you're doing. I didn't see much of Haryanto today because he didn't last very long, but hopefully he does the same. I'm got negative thoughts towards him, but I don't want him to do badly. I just don't think he'll do very well. So if he can pull something out of the bag, all power to him. Anyway, I've been going on too long now and not saying enough. So I'm going to call it a day. I'll do another one of these after Bahrain. So if you enjoy it, tell me. If you don't enjoy it, don't tell me. I'll see you guys next time.